a second. Wait, what day? What?
Oh, fuck.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's edition of the DMZ America podcast. It is Thursday, March 14th, 2024, here in the Western Hemisphere. I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
And coming to you from the left, but from the Northern Hemisphere, I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
Didn't I say Northern Hemisphere?
No, you said Western.
Oh,
we're both right.
Western.
That was my joke. That was my joke.
No, well, I got it, but I have to be self-aware.
I was trying to disagree with you, but being wrong.
I'll have to listen to myself.
Oh my
Is it the Western or the Northern Hemisphere?
Both.
I guess it's the, okay. Well, there it is.
Yeah, we're in the Western Hemisphere, and we are also in the Northern Hemisphere.
Well, good for us. So at least we know where we are.
Well, some of us do. Anyway.
Oh man, what a week. We got a lot to get to. As long as we can still do this, because no one's banned this yet. TikTok, the House just passed a ban TikTok legislation, and now I believe it goes to the Senate.
Correct. The president has indicated that he would sign it.
Which is weird because he's on fucking TikTok.
I know. He's like, ban me. I suck.
It's just that newfangled technology and the kids and their TikToking. Okay, big questions and then little questions. But the big question I have is, can the United States, let's say it passes, President Biden has a big ceremony and it's broadcast on TikTok and they ban TikTok. How did they do that? I mean, does the United States government does it have the technical ability to do this? Now, you and I have both traveled the country.
That's not what they're planning to do. They're not going to ban. The bill does not, which would be totally brazenly unconstitutional, is not to ban TikTok from your phone. If what they're trying to do is force a sale. So there's a law that says that if a foreign ownership of a company is deemed to hurt America's national security interests, a typical example of this would be, let's say Northrop Grumman, major defense contractor, were to be purchased by an American adversary like China or Russia or Iran, that the government could put the kibosh on that and say, the DOD could say, like, that just can't happen. We can't, that's a national security threat, even though Northrop Grumman is not a government entity. So we will not allow that. We will not put Northrop Grumman out of business. We will not stop them from putting out press conferences, but we will tell them, you cannot be foreign owned. So therefore we will give you a deadline to sell to an American owner. So that's exactly what's happening here. The bill would give TikTok's owners, ByteDance, 6 months to sell it to someone else, presumably at a fire sale price. If they refused, what would happen is that at that point, the company would be essentially out of business in the United States by law. And so the apps would remain, everyone who's downloaded the TikTok app so far and has it on their phone would keep it on their phone, but it would never update again. And as like iOS and the Google operating system was updated, it would get glitchy. No new users could download it ever again, and it would just sort of slowly wither and die. That's basically how this works.
Well, okay, so let me ask again a technical question, which you may or may not be able to answer. But how would they prevent it from being downloaded? How would they prevent? I guess, and how would they prevent?
It's not a technical thing. What it is it's like, there's a court order. Basically, there's a law that says, the law says TikTok may not be in business anymore because it is foreign owned and it is a threat to American national security. If TikTok defies that law, which they absolutely could do, they could, or let's say, yeah, but I can't imagine like that the Apple Store or Google would allow the apps to remain in their store. If they did, for some insane reason, the federal government would prosecute them, would file charges against, say, the Google Store or the Apple Store or TikTok and or all of the above, and say you are in violation of federal law. and
So how do you
prosecute.
prevent, well, then how would you prevent updates and stuff like that?
Well, you couldn't prevent it, but the government would. So it's kind of like, Scott, it's like this. Can the government technically use technical means to prevent you from driving your car to the bank and holding it up at gunpoint? No. But if you choose to do that, they can arrest you and put you in prison. That's what we're talking about here. So
Okay.
if TikTok defied the government somehow, figured out some way to defy the government, they would be prosecuted.
Okay, well, let's ask the bigger question then, the even bigger question. Should they do this? It seems dumb to me. The whole idea is that they're mining this information. Well, what's the difference between China mining that information that they will sell, because that's what they do, or Google stealing my information or getting my information and selling it, which they do? I mean, I don't understand. It's a sexy old people can point to this as being like, look, we're taking care of the threat from new media. But they're not. I mean, this just seems preposterous to me on a First Amendment level, on a practical level, just on a common sense level. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I think I think there's a lot of negative repercussions. Let me sort of go in no particular order, but here I'm just going to go through some of the problems that I have with this. Number one, there's no evidence, much less proof, that TikTok ever has or ever will transfer user data over to the Chinese Communist Party. There's no evidence that they ever have. They have specifically promised that they never would. They said that if the Chinese government ever requested such data, that they would refuse that. They're not based in China. Their headquarters are in Singapore. So they have a certain freedom of action here, where they can tell the Chinese government to go fuck themselves, and probably nothing much will happen. They'll lose their access to the Chinese market. That's all. So I think there's a big problem with, basically, this is one of those things like, why did we invade Iraq? Well, Saddam Hussein might have kept WMDs after the Gulf War. He might be friends with Al Qaeda. He might give his friends Al Qaeda those WMDs, and Al Qaeda might use those WMDs to attack the United States or its interests abroad. That's too many mights for me to go to war for. And similarly, like, all the mights involved in what TikTok might do is not enough. You don't ban effectively a company or force a sale or go after an individual over something that might happen. This is like Minority Report, right? It's pre-crime. You can't penalize people before they've done anything wrong. So that's first and foremost. Then you've got, I think there's a moral hazard issue. I mean, who's going to trust the United States to do business in this country if you could spend billions of dollars building up your brand and the infrastructure required to run it, only to have Congress step in on some thinly sourced political threat and nativism and xenophobia and decide to shut you down like that? Also, I agree with you completely about, like, our data is not private anyway. China has an incredibly sophisticated intelligence apparatus, and I don't just mean the balloons. They already know everybody in the United States. They have all our data. They get it from the dark web. They have their own intelligence agencies, the equivalent of the NSA. The NSA has all of our shit. GCHQ from Britain has all our shit. So privacy is a ship that has sailed. And so if Congress in their briefings has heard something that they haven't wanted to share with us, well, I gotta say, sorry, I can't support that. This is democracy. You got to fess up what you know, in the same way that JFK did during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where he didn't want to reveal the U-2 satellite, U-2 spy plane capabilities that allowed him to obtain those photos of the Russian missile bases in Cuba. But the point is, ultimately, he was like, I need the support of the American people to get involved in this brinkmanship with Russia. And I think it's the same sort of thing. If you guys know something, it's incumbent upon you to tell us. Otherwise, we have no reason to believe anything you have to say. This is ridiculous. I think it's also, since it's a dangerous message from a racism standpoint. It's basically telling Asians that somehow this is the old yellow menace, yellow horde kind of days. Like, you guys are scary because you're Chinese. I mean, all of it. It's like, and I can't really think, if this company in particular represents some sort of unique threat, then okay. If it calls for such an extreme act that's kind of like an end run around the First Amendment, then you better fucking explain it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But you and I both agree that transparency is usually the best way to run a government, and the best way to, convince people of a certain course of action.
Yes.
And so I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the First Amendment issues here, I just want to get back to the excuse me, the information mining that they claim will be going on there. I mean, the other thing is, have you been
It's
on
also going to
TikTok?
make us look backwards too. I mean, come on. Like, all the young kids, they all use this, and they're going to be like, what's with our country?
So what
being
information
so
are they going to
old-fashioned?
get? Let's say you and I drop into it. We put in our interests. I like puppies. You like kittens. That's what they're going to
Right.
get. That's the deepest information they're going to get about Scott Stantis and Ted Rall.
Yeah, I mean, like, what? Look, I don't know. I haven't. I did not. I have not. I'm not on TikTok, but I can't imagine that it wants anything other than, let's just say, it could get your name, your birthday, phone number, maybe.
Well, the AI can. I mean, your feed will start to. It says, "Oh, you spend time looking at puppies. You spend time looking at helicopters. You spend time, whatever your area of interest."
Flamethrower
And it'll start.
drones, theoretically.
Well, there it is. And so they'll start feeding that, they'll start funneling that into your feed,
Mm.
which means you're going to stay there longer, which is good for ad rates, blah, you know how this all works. But
And
ultimately,
by
I'm
the way,
just
you
trying
bring
to
up,
think.
that's a really important point. I mean, I was reading a really interesting article. I don't remember where this morning about this. They said that the bill doesn't even, it's kind of tackling the wrong problem. The real, like, cyber experts say that the real threat from TikTok is exactly what you just alluded to. The algorithms, that the algorithms could be programmed to, like, brainwash our youth, for example. To target, let's say, people who seem to be psychologically weak, as an example, and send them messages that were tailor-made for their psychosis. And so it's an algorithm issue. Well, the algorithms are run by a different company,
Yeah.
actually, and and data mining is not really a concern, as you allude to. I mean, come on. The Chinese government knows my phone number. They know my age. They know my birthday. They probably have my social. My social security number.
They
I'm
know
sure they
what
have
you
it
buy
all.
from Amazon. I mean,
Totally. Yeah, they have all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's Congress solving a non-existent problem poorly. It's almost not just like daylight savings time. I mean, of course, daylight savings time kills Americans every year. It causes
yes.
it causes accidents. People who are in fragile health drop dead the following week. So all the sleep experts, they get rid of it. So,
Yes.
all right. So you got to love Congress. They come up with they are currently about to pass a law that would make it permanent. In other words, this bad thing that we deal with for 6 months out of the year, they want to have for 12. It's like,
Oh, I like.
and they should, all the experts say, you have to go back to standard time, or winter time.
Really?
That's the real time, because you want the sun to come up when you get up. So you don't need sun at night. That's nice to have, but you don't have to have it. But your circadian rhythms are booted up in the morning. You should get up with the sun. And so when you get up and it's dark, you're going to be fucked up all day long. So,
Well,
I mean, I guess if we all slept an hour later than we normally do, I guess they would be fine. but if we're not,
well, Ted and we disagree. I think I like daylight savings time. I like the extra time. I'm not like you. Unlike you, I'm not a particularly early riser.
I'm going by the science. I mean, look, I like the fact that, look, I remember getting out of work in New York City at 5 o'clock in the winter, And it was, pitch black, especially on Wall Street with all the tall buildings and the narrow streets, and you can, there's no access. And you're like, fuck, I raced out of work at 5:00, and here I am in pitch dark. This is ridiculous. It's like 4 a.m. I get it, having a little light is night, but I'm just saying, like, setting your circadian rhythms is more important than look, it's bright.
Well, you cling to your science, Madam Curie. I like having sunlight later in the day. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also have to say, in terms of so the TikTok thing is, I don't know. I mean, I think it might pass. And it's very dangerous. Reminds me of this bill that's currently pending in Canada. I don't know if you heard about it. This Justin Trudeau has a crazy bill pending. It's a hate speech bill. And among other things, if you were convicted of hate speech under this bill in Canadistan, you could be sent to prison for the rest of your life. In fact, you could be sent to prison for the rest of your life if the authorities have reason to believe that you are considering issuing hate speech. Something
what?
It's literally like Minority Report. You should look it up. It's an insane thing. We should probably talk about it on the pod next time in detail after you've had a chance to look it up. But like Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale, all these literary figures are coming out against this bill. The ACLU, there's a Canadian equivalent of it. Everyone's talking about how even like Canadian newspapers have editorialized like authoritarianism, fascism has officially arrived in Canada.
What's the real motivation? You and I both know there's an actual motivation and the public motivation. What's the actual motivation for this legislation?
Well,
does
you got me.
Just
I mean, it's being presented as just like it's the ultimate embodiment of wokeosity. But I don't know. I mean, look, stopping it sounds kind of reasonable. Like, you shouldn't be calling for genocide of an ethnic group, let's say. I mean, obviously you shouldn't be doing that, but there's the language of this law is so vague and so non-specific. Literally, like, if your statements could cause offense. I mean, like, it causes me offense that Taylor Swift is dating a football player instead of a political cartoonist. It causes me offense, but fuck my offense, right? And fuck Taylor Swift's offense of what I just said. It's just like ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'll have to look it up. That's terrifying. So, okay, well, we're going to know within the next week or 10 days whether or not this passes the Senate and goes to the president. So
if it passes the Senate, then that's it.
Yes.
It's posturing. It's like meant to. By the way, if Biden really wants to take a big brown crap on top of the youth vote, this is a good way to do it.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to care about that much.
Yeah, he should care. But anyway, all right, we'll leave that there.
Well, this is a difference between should and does. Okay, so after the break, we will be back and we'll be talking about, other stuff.
Okay. Scott, what team is your bear hat?
That's the Cubs. That's the 1908 Bears cap.
Oh, that's so cute. All right.
Thank you.
Hey there. Welcome back to the DMZ America podcast for Wednesday, March 6th, 2024, podcast number 140, section 2. I'm Ted Rall, coming to you from the left.
And I'm Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right. We're going to be talking like this now. Euthanasia. There's, that's one of my favorite puns. There was a punk band called Youth in Asia. Were they any good?
They're all right. Not that great, really.
Well, they peaked at their name.
So as you brought up this topic, so you should probably bring us in.
Yeah. Illinois, where I am the editorial cartoonist among my many jobs, is the editorial cartoonist for the Chicago Tribune. Euthanasia or assisted suicide is now making its way through the state legislature there. Interestingly, they have, I believe, I'm not entirely sure how many other states. I know Oregon has it. Does any other American state have it, to your knowledge, Ted?
I think maybe Massachusetts.
That seems like a place you'd want to die. They obviously have it overseas, Switzerland being chief among them, but other European countries, I believe many of them, all, if not most, if not all of the Scandinavian countries have it. And effectively what you can do is you go and you say, let's say Ted, I'm sorry what the lump is. You've got 4 months, 5 months, 10 months, and you can go, okay, I don't want the pain and the suffering is not what I want to do. You sign a form, you go get tested psychologically to make sure you're A-okay, which I doubt you would be because, you
You
got
have
10 months
cancer.
to live.
Yes,
But
there's that.
okay, regardless of that, but you here, and this plays into the rest of the discussion. So stay with me. You have to prove that you're of sound mind and body to make this decision to say, yes, I want to use medically assisted suicide, which makes it easier. It does. I mean, a friend of mine is a anesthesiologist here in Alabama, and we've discussed this issue. And it's interesting. It's a pill. It's almost like it's like a mega Ambien in some way. You instead of taking one Ambien, you're taking 100. You take an anti-vomit medication, you take an anti-anxiety medication if you want it, and then you take the pill, and you go to sleep and you don't wake up. It's pretty simple stuff. It's painless. Although who knows, maybe your dreams you're going no, but it's generally perceived to be painless. Like I said, the state of Illinois is now debating this question. It's one of those questions that Ted and I go round and round about. I don't know that we're going to disagree on this one. There are elements of the law that I don't like, which is the sound mind and body, because Ted and I have both dealt with parents in dementia, family members who've dealt with dementia. Let's say you're diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and you know what's in the mail. We've witnessed it. We've seen it. We know what's coming. But how this law is structured, how most of the laws for assisted suicide are structured, you cannot wait until you are disabled by dementia. That is to say, you learn now, oh my gosh, I've been having some cognitive issues. You have early onset Alzheimer's. You can do it now. But if I say, listen, I'm going to have probably 18 months of relatively good life, and I'd like to live that. You can't do that. At the end of those 18 months, when you are literally mentally debilitated because of the tests they use to see if your cognitive skills are enough that you've made a conscious, clear decision, those are going to be gone. So, then you can say, well, now we're talking about euthanasia. Are you talking about, and euthanasia, I have a serious problem with, because you can say, Ted pissed me off that last segment. He'd want to be put to sleep. Ted would have wanted it this way. And Ted's going, no, I don't. Yeah, no, Ted, he wants to die. Give him the injection now. No, I don't want it. Trust me. He's out of his mind. Just let's end the suffering now. That's where euthanasia can be used as a weapon against somebody, and I don't agree with that. But assisted suicide, I have a problem. I'm not sure if you do too, Ted. I have a problem with suicide in the sense that I find it selfish, and I find it to be, I don't think God likes it. Well, you don't believe in God, so I guess this isn't an issue for Ted.
No, God doesn't get a vote in my democracy.
But given what I've just described, I mean, this sounds like something that the United States should have. We do it for dogs, we do it for horses, we do it for cows.
This used to make me feel very uncomfortable, and not least because of, I think it was called the T1 program, the Nazis' euthanasia program in the late 1930s, that was used to basically say that it was used against mentally ill and disabled people to say that it was life unworthy of life, or some such phrase. And it was the gateway to the Holocaust. In fact, they started the idea of gassing people en masse in the euthanasia program. They jury rigged vans. They called them gas vans, and basically they put people in the back of the van, and they ran a hose up from the exhaust pipe and then drove around until everyone was dead. And so, without, most historians say that the Holocaust, the seeds of it are planted with the T1 euthanasia program. That said, I kind of say, look, I mean, with appropriate safeguards, obviously that's a huge asterisk. I think it is an important option for people to be able to have. I mean, I think if you start to feel or understand that, let's just say you're going to die, there's not really any substantial hope for treatment, you're going to die painfully in not very long from now, but you can avoid that. You can short circuit that by taking a final exit 3 months early. You should have that option. I would say that if you also start to feel like you're a person who cares about the life of the mind, and you start to feel that you can be tested in a way that proves this is true, and you're assessed to be suffering from irreversible dementia, then again, I think you should have that option. Hell, I might avail myself of it. So,
well, let me ask you this though, and here's where it gets complicated. One of the Scandinavian countries, and I want to say Denmark, but it could be one of the others, also extends this right of assisted suicide to depression.
Yep. Like a friend of mine recently did that. I'm trying to see which country she died in.
What do you mean? She was
Switzerland. Nora Vincent. She was a writer, a very brilliant writer for the Village Voice, and she, a couple of years ago, just shy of 2 years, 53 years old, she traveled to Switzerland, and she suffered from depression, and so she had long suffered from depression, so she had herself killed in Switzerland, had herself put down.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I miss her, and I wish she hadn't done that. Obviously, she was in incredible pain. She decided to do it her way. And I always respect someone who decides to do things their way. You and I have talked about that. But I wish she hadn't done that. And I wish she would have felt that she could have reached out to people like me and other friends and family to feel better. I wish she could have gotten that treatment, psychological treatment could have helped. She was obviously troubled. I mean, it's really no different than someone jumping off of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right.
She just decided to do it without causing any muss and fuss to the Coast Guard. So she had every right to do that. I wish she hadn't, but it was her choice to make.
I don't know if she had a right, and I'm certainly deeply troubled by the state enabling someone to commit suicide that way, for those reasons. And it's not that I don't understand depression. I suffer from it myself, but and this may just be a generational thing, that you can work through it, and it does get better. Suicide is a short-term solution to a long-term problem. You can work on it, and she may have, your friend probably obviously felt hopeless, and I'm not diminishing or demeaning people who get to that point, but I have a significant problem with the state enabling that suicide. I really, really do in that instance. And that's where, and again, the possibility of abuse is significantly raised under those circumstances.
There's no question about that. Like, I mean, abuse is almost like, it's hard to imagine how that's not going to happen. It's an incredible power that, you just know that someone's going to, I mean, someone who wants that inheritance is going to be like, so mom, bye.
Yeah. You don't want mom soaking up by being in the rest home, and you spending all that money that could go towards you and your fabulous vacations.
Exactly.
So, okay. Well, it sounds like you and I really don't disagree on it. It's an issue that fascinates me. Like I said, dealing with a family member who has dementia, and just looking down the road at what lies ahead as I turn 65 in a couple of months. Would hope I'll just go to Ted's and just get myself, go on the subway with a backpack and tell the cops to go fuck themselves if they don't search it, which is a great segue to our next segment.
Indeed it is. So we'll take a quick break and get back to that.
And we're back to the final segment of the DMZ America podcast. I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall, coming to you from the left.
Do you have to think about that?
Kind of, yeah.
Is that your real name?
Yeah, I'm like Joe Biden. I am not. I'm telling you, the allergies are really fucking me up. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you can tell my voice is getting huskier and huskier here. So we're talk quick here before we have no voice at all, or I sound exactly like Kathleen Turner, who was an actress in the 1980s for all you kids out there,
Yes.
who had a notoriously husky voice.
Romancing
And now,
Romancing the Stone, among other things.
If you've seen her recently, and Body Heat.
Yes, Body Heat.
Yes. Those of us of a certain age. Yeah. So now Kathleen Turner sounds like she smokes 5 packs a day.
Which might be true. Yeah. I think she's having some serious health setbacks, actually.
Yeah, I believe so too. Okay, so Gaza and Haiti and Ukraine. Oh my. Gaza and Haiti and Ukraine. Oh my. Gaza and Haiti and Ukraine. Oh my. We've got international stuff taking over the headlines like never before. So let's begin. Just go down the list. Gaza, it looks like Israel really is going to flatten every square inch of the place. They're going to, and Ted, help me, the name of the town they're about to enter. They've entered furtively, but now
Rafah.
they're going to go. Rafah, they're going to go in full tilt boogie. They have offered to move people. This is very generous, to move them to northern Gaza.
Or central Gaza.
Is it central? I thought it was
central Gaza, where there's nothing left.
Small.
Everything's been either bombed or bulldozed. The Israelis have bulldozed everything that was left standing from the bombing campaign. And they would create what they call a humanitarian island. You cannot make these things up, in the middle of the rubble for 1.4 million displaced people. Humanitarian island.
So there we are. It kind of plays into what I thought Israel was going to do, which is they're going to level it and just start from scratch, begin a Marshall Plan type partnership with Egypt, with Jordan, with Saudi Arabia, maybe the Emiratis, maybe Kuwait and other Middle Eastern players, and rebuild the place in a model that's more to the liking of Israel. Ted, does that sound like where they're going with this?
They might do that. I'm not really believing that they're serious about this. I think this is a distraction. I think the Egyptians have bet something different. That's why the Egyptians have built this giant retaining wall about 2 miles outside of the border between Gaza and Egypt. They're clearly expecting the population to be expelled into the Sinai Desert, which belongs to Egypt. And I think that's still what's going to happen. I think this is a deflection. It's a feint, right? It's like they're pretending that they're going to send these people north. The reason I don't think it's true is because it's so half-baked. They haven't announced any timeline for when the people would be starting to move, any deadline for it, any deadline for an action inside of Rafah militarily. They have not started construction of the humanitarian island in any way, shape, or form. I mean, this would be a massive endeavor, right? Moving 1.4 million people, even if you wanted to do it within a month, it would be logistically a lot of work. And to set up a place where they could all stay and receive food and other supplies, I just don't believe it. I don't think it's true. I think it's bullshit. There's the total lack of detail coming out of the IDF suggests to me that they're not really doing this. This is just bullshit for Western consumption to keep us off guard, because they're feeling the heat, even from Biden today. And today, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer reamed Israel and demanded that Netanyahu step down. That's almost like an
election.
That's almost like regime change. Almost. Well, a major U.S. official tells another country, a client state, we'd like your government to change.
The Schumer, though, the Schumer comment was kind of weird. He says, I'm demanding that they have an election and kick Netanyahu out.
Yep.
Well, let's turn the tables. It would be like Israel saying, we demand America have an election and kick Biden out.
Right.
Well, fuck you. You don't have that right to tell us what to do.
We have no ability to tell us that, right? I mean, and I want to bear in mind, this was not just a remark uttered on the Senate stairs. This was a high-profile, announced, ballyhooed major speech read by Schumer on the floor of the United States Senate. This is a policy speech, and he's the majority leader of the Senate.
coming from New York State, which has, as you might imagine, a very powerful connections to the Jewish lobby in the United
Of course,
States. So, and it's been very pro-Israel up to this point. I think
yes.
what Israel has done is beyond the pale, and now um, I'd like to see the rebuilding begin, but they apparently are going to level every square inch
Well,
of
there will
Gaza.
be rebuilding. It just won't. I don't think it's likely to involve
Yeah.
any Palestinians.
See, I can't agree with you on that one. And you and I disagree on this, that I do believe that it makes sense from a public relations standpoint, frankly, from a
They don't
practical
care.
standpoint.
You know, the thing about, I'm writing about this now for a column for next week. The Israelis are, I mean, I've been a few times. Israel, you know how, like, if you go to other countries and you turn on the news, like the BBC or whatever, and you can do that here, you're struck by how incredibly internationalist it is. I mean, if you turn on the news in, like, in Tokyo or London or anywhere in the world, the headlines come from everywhere. There'll be like, and the ongoing crisis in East Timor, we go live, and it's like, the situation in Burkina Faso, the flooding that you've been following now for days. There's no, basically the world is covered like really aggressively, right? It doesn't matter where the story is. But in the United States, we only cover international affairs if the international story affects the United States in some way. For example, the crisis in Haiti, we're following that because we might end up with Haitian refugees here. So we're interested in that. And the US might intervene militarily, and we have in the past. But we're not going to cover, even more important stories. Like, we haven't covered the civil war in Syria at all, except when it first started, because we thought it kind of involved Israel. But now it's contained, and that's that. And it's a proxy war between us and Russia. So anyway, Israel is even more insular than the United States. It's like North Korea over there. I mean, they're in an echo chamber. They only talk, their news is all about Israel, 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 and stuff that affects Israel. Like, will the Americans send us more weapons? That's it. And not only that, they speak the most like internationally useless language in the world, Hebrew. I mean, if you're in the United States, like during the Bush years, where you have all the propaganda about the war on terror, you still have access to, you speak English, which is the international lingua franca, right? And you can check out the BBC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the CBC, any number of other English-speaking countries. Pakistan, India have English language press that you can check out online. That's, if you're in France and you think the French government's feeding you a line of bullshit, there's a lot of other countries whose media is francophonic, right? I mean, Hebrew, that's not true. They resurrected a weird, cobbled together version of a dead language that only these people speak. So they have absolutely no sense of how they're perceived by the rest of the world. They don't get it. They're not stupid, but they're completely insular. And the thing is, they've lost access even to the most important people that they need to know. They've put all the Palestinians on the other side of these giant security walls. But if you went before those walls went up, Palestinians worked with and for Israelis. They were friends. They had shops together. They dated. They knew each other. They talked about each other's lives. That's just not true anymore. So the Israelis don't understand the plight of the Palestinians. Like they say, we were at peace until before October 7th. Hamas broke the peace. Like, no, Israel was at peace before October 7th. The Palestinians were not at peace. And like, that doesn't justify what happened on October 7th at all. But it's just saying they weren't at peace. It shows that the Israelis, so 5 months in, Israel's approval rating internationally and in the United States is at its absolute fucking rock bottom. They're never going to see the $60 billion that Biden wanted to send them for the war, ever. And now the $3.8 billion that they get a year from the Camp David Accord, that's in jeopardy. They're sinking fast. I mean, just think about it. 5 months ago, we were all like, holy shit, poor Israelis, 1,200 dead, 200 hostages. What a bunch of scumbags the Hamas are. That's so awful. Those poor, beautiful young people at the rave festival. I can't believe this happened. And now that's all been eclipsed because they have killed over 30 times more people than that. I mean, they still have their supporters, but man, that tide's running out.
Well, I think you're right. I think they had their reaction initially, especially from America, especially from an America that experienced 9/11. They see your desire, your drive for revenge was over. You needed someone to rein it back and have a better reaction. Now,
And opportunism. I mean, the U.S. did a lot of stuff opportunistically after 9/11, right? I mean,
well, yeah.
the USA Patriot Act, that wasn't written in a hurry. That was sitting around waiting to go. That kind of thing.
Yeah, no,
Invading
well,
Iraq,
and preemptive, and the idea
Cheney
of
wanted to
preemptive
do
war.
that in 98, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to say that the idea of preemptive war, the invasion of Iraq had been a neocon wet dream
Fantasy.
for decades.
Yeah.
For decades. Now, let's move on, if we can, to Haiti,
Mhm.
where they've spiraled yet again. Haiti just seems to not be able to get its shit together, which is weird because on the other side of the island is the Dominican Republic,
Mhm.
which is just putzing right along and doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So Haiti now, the gangs have taken over. The prime minister was on vacation, which I love, and never went back.
Vacation's all I ever wanted.
Well, I can't blame him.
Well, no, he actually tried to come back, but the airport was closed.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Since then, in my understanding, he hasn't really made much of an effort to get back.
Well, the U.S. has told him we would really appreciate it if you were to fuck off and get lost.
Well, he has offered to resign. The United States has offered to broker peace talks, but the gangs are insisting for a seat at the table, which is hilarious. It's like, it would be like Don Corleone insisting that, during peace talks over like New York. I mean, Ted, does the United States, we have sent troops in there so many times.
No more times than one could count. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we do it again? Do we go out there with
no, because
force?
it never goes well, and the U.S. always has a terrible fucking influence on Haiti and makes bad situations even worse. No, we don't. But there are two regional Caribbean organizations of Caribbean states that can go in and do this. I think this should either be blue helmets from the UN or in cooperation with regional actors. I think this should be all the major Caribbean countries that can muster a force. It's going to be hard to exclude Cuba because it's by far the biggest country down there. But I would definitely have Cuba, Belize, maybe some Central American countries like Honduras, maybe Venezuela. You would want to see some traditional, like a hodgepodge of both pro-American and anti-American countries get involved, so that it's very clear that this isn't a political agenda. It's just about putting the fire out.
I also worry about putting boots on the ground and having, putting American boys and girls' lives in danger for this, because the gangs are clearly in control. This is not the only country where this has happened. Honduras, the gangs are in control. Venezuela, the gangs are outside of Caracas. My understanding is gangs are very much in control. Same with Nicaragua. Where's the nicest dictator in the world? Is that El Salvador? Is that how he describes himself as? Oh my gosh, the coolest dictator in the world. Good God.
Well, he was elected, in fairness.
Well, once.
Well,
and his take on gangs, I don't know that you can face this issue in any other way than the way he has faced it, which is overwhelming military force, bombing the shit out of the limousines of these drug kingpins and just saying, no more.
That can work sometimes. It didn't work with the bloodthirsty president of the Philippines, but it definitely can. It could work sometimes.
Well, did it get rid of the gangs? I think it did.
Yeah, I don't think it actually did. Is the problem?
Really?
Yeah, well, they're still around.
So I think you and I'm always loath, especially now with sending American troops anywhere. And I think you're right. Putting together what is it? Oh gosh, the Organization of American States,
Mhm.
OAS, putting a force of them, which would mean obviously Canadians, Americans, Mexican, and all the other, like you said, and I think a very good mix to go in and take care of this. Would you allow the gang members a seat at the negotiating table then, or would you not? You sounds like you wouldn't.
Well, no, I would. I absolutely would give them a seat at the negotiating table because they are a formidable political and military force. I mean, you can't ignore what's there. And the group I was thinking about is the Association of Caribbean States or the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. But the point is that you definitely need you have to include all the major regional actors. I mean, otherwise you end up like with what we did in Afghanistan after the overthrow of the Taliban in 2001. And we put together a Loya Jirga, which is a traditional tribal council, to put together a new government. And everyone was invited except, the Taliban, who controlled 95% of the country. You can't just sort of, and we know how that works out. You have to have everyone at the table. I mean, you can't really have a settlement in 1945 in Germany if you were a Nazi, you're not invited to participate. They were all Nazis. I mean,
Well, the denazification, that was a huge debate right after the war
yeah,
on all sides. And
but denazification didn't mean that people who were former Nazis were excluded from all public life. It meant that
they couldn't.
They had to be completely rehabilitated and renounce it.
But in the Russian zones, they were for a short period of time. They started to they no former Nazis. Well, it would left you with 5 people who didn't know what the fuck was going on.
Yeah, exactly. They couldn't even run the sewage system. Yeah.
So last but not least, Ukraine. You gonna get that?
Yeah, sorry.
Ukraine. There's a big debate going on within the United States Congress whether or not to pay for this, continue to support Ukraine or force them to the negotiating table. I'm one of the ones who think they should go to the negotiating table. I hate it. I don't like Vladimir Putin. I don't like what Russia did, but you know what? We live in the real world, and frankly, Ted, there's the only thing that's left is a negotiated peace. Ukraine is not, remember their vaunted spring offensive, which did absolutely nothing.
Right.
And that was with full funding from the United States. It achieved literally zero. We look at the Donbass is now controlled by Russia. They have a corridor to the Crimea, which is controlled by Russia. I think you establish those borders and it doesn't make me feel good to say this. I hate it, but to codify those gains, allowing Ukraine to remain as a legitimate country, and recognized by Russia. I don't see any other way around it, Ted. I just see no other than to drag this out as Americans do in perpetuity. And in 20 years from now, we know exactly how it will end.
We do. We know how it'll end. So I think that we should not have anything to do with this process anymore. I think I always said that there was no chance that the Ukrainians were ever going to prevail here. And frankly, aside from the fact that there's been so much destruction of property and so many people have died on both sides, this war has had one positive effect, which is it effectively redraws the lines where they should have been in the first place, with all of the parts of Ukraine that were ethnically Russian, should never have been in Ukraine in the first place, brings them into Russia, leaves them there. No more than that, right? That it's not like there's going to be any parts of Ukraine that are ethnically Ukrainian that will end up in Russia when
he tried. When they came
they tried
boogie across the border.
So the point is, this kind of worked out the way it was supposed to. And I think part of the issue is you can't really occupy people who don't want to be in your country. And the Eastern Ukrainians never wanted to be in Ukraine. They wanted to be in Russia. The Crimeans clearly wanted to be in Russia. And now they are. And I suspect if that was not true, the Ukrainians would have found it easier to make progress against the Russians because they would have had the assistance and the tacit consent of the local population, which currently they do not.
but during the negotiations now, it has to be made incumbent on Putin that the going in to save ethnic Russians has ended, because what Stalin did and Russian leaders following him for the especially Baltic states, as I've mentioned many times before, I'm Lithuanian, is that they sent in, especially to Vilnius, Riga in Latvia, and oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the capital of Estonia. They shipped in a ton of ethnic Russians. The idea now going forward is, I think Vilnius remains 20%, 18% ethnic Russian.
Mm-hmm.
The playbook for Putin is they're being diminished, they're being ostracized, they're being.
Well, that's not untrue, by the way. That has happened. The Soviet Union sent their ethnic Russians to all throughout the former 15 Soviet republics.
Right.
And then a lot of them stayed behind after 1991 and the collapse of the USSR. And many of them found their lives pretty unpleasant, and not just in, Eastern Europe, also in Central Asian republics. And
but does that mean then that, for instance, Venezuela has a right to invade the United States because life for ethnic Venezuelans in the United States currently is pretty rough?
No, it doesn't. But but the point is, it's not a point that is completely lost or pulled out of thin air. That's all I'm trying to say.
It's not pulled out of thin air, but the response by Putin and his minions is to go in and save them. And by saving them, that means taking over the territory.
I think the real reason that Russia invaded Ukraine was because of the NATO thing. Really, truly.
Well, but you have to make it clear that this has to stop, that this ends here.
I would say that maybe the trade-off is, look, let's face it, Ukraine's lost. So they don't really hold a lot of cards here. But it doesn't mean that they don't get anything.
I don't think Ukraine's lost. Ukraine's lost those territories, but they're still
they lost the war.
No, well, yes and no, Ted, because don't forget that if you remember the beginning of the war, it was a full-fledged invasion. The Russian troops were marching towards Kiev or Kyiv, or however we're saying it this week. And the Ukrainians, to their credit, pushed them back because there were ethnic Ukrainians in between. I'm saying that there are ethnic Ukrainians.
That doesn't mean anything. There's the lay of the land right now, right? The point is the war has now ground on for over 2 years. And we know where we are, and clearly,
and where we will stay,
and where we're likely to stay for the foreseeable future. And the fact is, Ukraine lost. It's not like Ukraine recaptured all of its territory. It's not like Ukraine penetrated Crimea. It's not like Ukraine made inroads into Russia. It's like they've lost. So when they come to the negotiating table, it doesn't mean that they have to lick the piss off the floor. But the point is, they've lost. They're going to have to give up a lot more than they're going to be able to get, than the Russians are going to have to give up. I would say any hope. If I were the Russians, what I came for would be I'd be like, you never join NATO. You promise that in writing. You don't even think about NATO. You don't have thoughts about NATO while you're sleeping. No NATO. And it's like we both guarantee each other's territorial integrity along the new borders. These parts, the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic, those are brought into Russia. They become Russian provinces. You acknowledge that. You acknowledge Crimea. New border is guaranteed. We agree, and we agree not that's it. And no more shelling, no more hostilities. We don't view each other as adversaries or enemies. The end. And now, if I were Putin and I wanted to push a hard bargain, I'd ask the Americans to guarantee that they would not ask, say, Moldova to join NATO or any other, no more NATO expansion at all.
Well, that's too late for that, because Sweden just joined NATO. It looks like Finland will.
Yep.
So as many countries as they can, because they don't want to be invaded by Russia. And I can't blame them.
They're going to be invaded by Russia. God,
yeah, they are.
What
Ted,
a bunch of paranoid people.
Oh, shut up. But he's done it. He's been doing it for the last decade and a half. So you can't say he doesn't do it.
You're making it act. What countries has, let's look at the list of all Russian military interventions under Putin, right? Should we go through them? There's not very many, really. There's the South Ossetia thing.
Yeah,
in
Chechnya,
Georgia.
which is not
Chechnya,
Georgia.
Chechnya is in Russia. So it is a Russian
They
province.
don't want to be. You
All
can't say
right,
they
well,
want to be.
Hawaii doesn't want to be either. But the point is, if we invade Hawaii, it's still part of the United States, right? I mean, come on, Chechnya doesn't count. Chechnya is part of Russia. It's like basically it's not an invasion from under international law. It's not an invasion. So there's the Georgia thing, which is that frozen conflict zone. There's Nagorno-Karabakh, which has nothing to do with them, really. There's the Transnistria, which is a frozen conflict zone also, and they haven't invaded or expanded out of that. These are all like badly drawn Soviet era borders that don't make sense as independent nation states after 1991. I mean, the only country that Russia has invaded in the modern sense of the word is Ukraine.
Well, I'd say Georgia probably disagree with that one. And they'd be right. He stomped in and took territory that wasn't his, that wasn't internationally recognized as his, and he took it. And I can see him going into the Baltic states. I can absolutely see that.
I can't, because I think he would view it as insanely, he doesn't need it, and he would view it as insanely provocative to the West.
I think Poland is scared shitless, and should be, because I've just finished that book that you lent me about the history of Hitler and Stalin. And Poland has always kind of been
nothing personal, just passing through.
They've always been the bitch of Russia. They always show up once in a while.
Buffer state, because you're a buffer state.
Anyway, so if you could get some guarantees from Putin on that. So that's where we stand, the foreign policy of the DMZ America podcast. You can write it down.
Indeed, you could write it down. You could put it inside a flamethrower drone. You can do anything you want.
Ooh. Hey, one last question about Ukraine. I know I read in the last 24, 48 hours that Ukraine now is sending drones into Russia.
Mm-hmm. Well, they have been.
Yeah, but now they've upped the game, and I'm wondering if what they're hoping to achieve by this, other than to
well, I think what's happening is they realize that they're not making any progress in the traditional battle zone, with infantry and artillery. This is an old-fashioned artillery war. So they're like, okay, well, maybe we can a drone is kind of like a low-cost way to, inflict some damage behind enemy lines. They blew up a refinery, a part of one. So they sunk a ship that way too, right? If memory serves.
Yeah.
A pretty big one that was in the port in Crimea, in Sebastopol. So I think this is it's a tactic to try to soften. They know that they're ultimately going to be heading toward the negotiating table, and they're trying to soften up the Russians beforehand. I don't think it'll work. That's just not the Russian mentality to let that get to them. Also, I don't know if you saw that poll, but someone managed to do an internal poll in Ukraine. If the election were held today, Zelensky would get about 20% of the vote. He's very unpopular, but the general that he fired, Zaluzhny, would win like 70% of the vote.
Well, that's what they need, is a general in charge. What could go wrong there?
Well, we did have Eisenhower. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, he was actually pretty good.
We've had a lot of generals. We've had a lot of generals. Zachary Taylor, Andrew Jackson. Yeah. William Henry Harris.
Grant.
He didn't last that long, though.
No, just a month. But, he gave a hell of a... No, he actually didn't.
Grant was a pretty decent president.
Yeah, he was better than we...
And there were other candidates, right? Like the best looking man in American politics, Lewis Cass, was a general.
Oh, God, Lewis Cass, man. Melting. And then melt face.
And there was also... Was it 1880? There was some general who ran and lost.
No, that's Garfield.
Garfield
he won. He was a general,
but he ran against who did he run against? No, he didn't. He didn't want to. That
I can't believe I can't bring this.
Let me take a look at this. No, it'll come back. Oh, it's Winfred Scott.
Oh, okay, another general. Yeah, two generals.
Yeah, so there's a lot of generals who tried to run also, and failed. So. And Jim Stockdale, the admiral of them all. Anyway,
Who
Scott,
am I? Why am I here?
That's my favorite. Where can everyone go outside of the DMZ America podcast? Not that you'd ever want to live outside of the DMZ America podcast.
No, this is my happy place.
It's my happy space as well. Where can they find your stuff?
Go to gocomics.com/Scott Stantis to see my editorial cartoons. Gocomics.com/Prickly City to see my political comic strip, fantastically called Prickly City. You can go to chicagotribune.com/opinion and see a gallery of the work I draw for them. You can go to Dallas News and see the work I draw for the Dallas Morning News. And you can hear me talk even more. If you haven't already had your fill of Scott, you can go to Centerclip, which is a wonderful site and app that you can put on your phone or visit on your laptop or your desktop. It's mini podcasts, 30 seconds, no longer than 5 minutes. My very good friend, let's say best friend, Ted Rall, is on it as well with his insightful insights. And it really is worth it. Center Clip, check it out. Ted, where can we see things? Old Ted?
Lots of good stuff on there besides us even. You can find me at whowhatwhy.org. Go over to Sputnik News. Go to X. You can find my radio show with Angie Wong called The Final Countdown, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Look on X Spaces and on Rumble for that. You don't have to listen to it live if you don't want to, but it is Monday through Friday. And you can go to gocomics.com/Ted Rall and just sort of go to rawl.com and you'll find lots of stuff about me and by me going on there.
And let me jump in real quick and say on the Final Countdown, I listened to it on Rumble. If you're tired of like the bullshittery of talk radio that has now become prevalent, I mean, pretty much the only thing you can hear, I think why do liberals want to eat their babies? I mean, just these numbskulls blathering in the echo chamber. Seriously, Ted's show, The Final Countdown. I mean, I have no reason. I'm not getting any money for this.
Only sexual favors.
It is, well, there's that, but Clovis doesn't seem to mind. It really is the most listenable and the most interesting of the radio talk shows anywhere that I've found. There may be others that are, this is such a high bar, honest to God, folks. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. The Final Countdown, Ted Rall, Angie Chang, right?
Angie Wong.
Angie Wong, because your former.
There's Manila Chan.
Okay, so God, okay, Angie Wong. I apologize. Yeah, they are terrific. They were.
Not to be confused with Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan.
Chaka Khan.
Chaka Khan. By the way, 1880 presidential election, Scott. I don't know if you knew this, but that's an insanely tight election.
Yes, well, because it came off of the 76 election.
48.32% of the vote to Winfield Scott Hancock's 48.21% of the vote.
Don't forget, that was only 4 years after the Rutherford B. Hayes / Sam Tilden, race that got thrown into the House of Representatives. Yeah, it's a fiasco. It was, I mean, it just, hijinks ensued. Let's just put it that way.
Well, without a doubt, anybody who says that our elections that were not fucked up before recently,
yeah,
go look at that one. Yeah.
Wrong.
All right,
everybody, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another pod unless something really interesting happens, in which case Ted and I will be on it like flies on
shit
or other flies.
Well, if they're hot flies. All right, thank you, everybody. Bye. That was a bad ending. Okay, bye.